Start the recording. All right, waiting for this. And I think after that, well, I'll be set. Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord. We are live. We are live. So praise the Lord, everyone. Just want to welcome you to our study this morning. I want to welcome you to our study this morning. We bless God for you. We thank God for you. And we are grateful to be here. We are grateful to be here. Good morning, Mother Paula. Glad to have you with us this morning. Glad to have you with us this morning. Amen. So we just bless God. We bless God for just the space and opportunity. And I thank God for all that are present with us on the platform this morning as well. We bless God for everyone that's available on the platform. So we welcome this morning. I guess my head is somewhat cut off. So let's do this. Okay, there you go. So we welcome this morning. We welcome Minister Davis of Detroit. Amen. Minister Tiffany Davis of Detroit. We welcome Minister Equella Burns of York, Pennsylvania. Amen. So we thank God for everyone. We thank God for everyone. And we know that there are a lot of things going on in the world. So before we get into that, Minister Equella, would you mind taking us into prayer? Would you mind taking us into prayer?
Precious Father, we come before you to say thank you. Lord, we thank you for this moment that you have given us, that we're able to set aside a few minutes to come boldly before your throne. Father, we thank you for this morning that you have given us, that you breathe life into each one of us one more time. And oh, Father, for the moments that we have taken that very act for granted. Father, we thank you. Father, we ask that you go before each one of us as we dive into your word, as we dive into this conversation. Oh, Father, that we know that you have went before us, that you dwell in us. And oh, Father, we thank you. Father, we ask that you go before every person that comes on this platform with us. Oh, Father, allow the words that is expressed to illuminate a path, to direct the path. Father, we know that you are able, and we thank you for all things. We ask all these things in your wonderful, your precious name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Bless God. We thank you for the prayer this morning. We bless God for you. We're going to read our text. We are reading out of the book of Ecclesiastes. And that is going to be the 5th chapter. We are going to read the 8th and the 9th verse. The 8th and the 9th verse is what we're going to read. So it's the book of Ecclesiastes 8 and 9. Amen. So we just thank God for everyone that's present. We thank God for you joining us this morning. We actually stick with us through this Bible class and the conversation that we're looking to have this morning as well. So we bless God for you. We are reading Ecclesiastes 5, 8, and 9. I'm reading from the KJ version. And it reads, "If thou seest the oppression of the poor, and violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province, marvel not at the matter. For he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they. Moreover, the profit of the earth is for all. The king himself is served by the field." Amen. Amen. That's our text. And we want to get into discussion. There's a lot of turmoil going on right now. We've got COVID. We've got the George Floyd incident that's going on right now. So there's a lot of turmoil and unrest in the country, and even so much in the world that's going on. And we want to dive into this topic. I believe it's relevant, and I believe that it needs to be discussed. So again, I welcome Minister Equella, Minister Davis as a part of the conversation as well. Thank you, Minister Russell, for joining. Appreciate that. Thank you, sir, for being a part of this discussion with us this evening. And for all of our individuals on Facebook, if you have any questions or any thoughts, please feel free to write those in, and we will address them accordingly. So because we want to hear your thoughts, we want to hear your statements, your questions. We want to hear that this morning, and we really wanted to dive into these conversations. Amen. So I would like to start with this quote by Hugo Claus. I just want to start with this quote. It says, "I am a person who is unhappy with things as they stand. We cannot accept the world as it is." Amen. So I want to start there. I just want to start there. Good morning, Jillian. Sorry, Jillian. Thank you for joining this morning as well. Amen. I am unhappy. I'm a person unhappy with things as they stand. We cannot accept the world as it is, and and coming from the Black experience, a lot of things that are taking place in the world right now, the things that we are seeing, they're not new. They're not new. All right. We see a lot of injustice. We see a lot of oppression. We see a lot of brutality, a lot of abuse of power and authority. But within the Black community, these things aren't new. They're not new to us. So we we see the incident that took place with George Floyd, and we can actually go back and we can look at other incidents that are very similar. We can look at other incidents that are very similar to that, and I believe that these conversations need to be had. It is not a place to put it under the carpet as if it's just going to magically go away, and that these things will not impact us any further, and that beautiful change is just going to magically appear and justice is magically going to show up. If we don't begin to have these conversations and begin to do things that will create justice, create change, then we're going to be left with the same status quo that we're currently dealing with. And we've seen a lot of things get hid under carpets, but except we as a people stand up and begin to make movements, then there's nothing that transpires. There's nothing that happens. Um, we see what had to take place in order for the civil rights movement to be effective and to create effective change. We see what things have to take place for that. And except everybody come together, especially those on the platform of the Black community, except leaders come together within the Black community and begin to have some really serious conversations, then we don't see these changes. We don't see these changes. Imagine, if you would, if Martin Luther King would not have gathered with others and not gather the Black community together. Imagine what world we would currently live in if those things wouldn't have happened. If you just said, you know what, somebody else is going to do it, the president is going to make change happen, these things are going to happen. If he wouldn't have stepped up and other Black leaders joined with him and helped move and help create a strong stance throughout the Black community as a whole, not one Black community in one city, not one Black community in one location, but as a whole. If they would not have come together as a whole, we would still be dealing with segregation. We would still be segregated as far as schools go and educational opportunities, jobs, restaurants, and a whole variety of other things. We would still be required to sit at the back of the bus if a seat was available. Our young men would face more brutality than what's going on now. And I'm not saying that brutality is non-existent. I'm saying that it has modified the nation in how they treat Blacks today. But it took the Black community coming together. We can look and say, man, the white community should do something. But really, if we really want to see change take place, it's something that we're going to have to address. And we're going to have a united, strong stance in addressing that. Because we have protests that have come up from George Floyd, but we also have protests from Trayvon Martin. We have protests from Ahmaud Arbery. We've had other protests that have come up, and you see all these what I call micro protests in different areas. But it's going to be a collective effort. It's going to be a gathering of all the people that's going to really make those things impactful, powerful, and long-standing. And that long-standing is an important piece. That long-standing is an important piece. If we're not willing to go the distance, imagine if you would, the distance that Martin Luther King had to go through, the longevity of it, the treatment that he had to receive in order to create positive change in a very in a system that is systemically designed to oppress, to limit, and to segregate people of color from a number of opportunities. So we deal with that. And I agree with you, Mother Paula. Mexicans as well. I'm speaking really in reference to all Black and brown people. If we don't take a stand somewhere, then whose fault is it that we are treated the same way? If we don't take a stand somewhere. So there's a few things I just wanted to point out, because I mean we've the police brutality is nothing really new. Police brutality is not new. It's something that has taken place throughout history, throughout American history. The treatment of Black and brown people has been at this level, sometimes even worse, throughout history. It's been like that throughout history, since we arrived to this land. This has been the systemic problem with this country since we arrived here. So it's, and there's a quote in the Declaration of Independence. Um, there's a quote in the Declaration of Independence. Let me see if I can grab that real quick. It just says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And if I can just talk about that just for a minute, I was listening to a song by a young man, and he said, "I just want to live." And I listened to it over and over and over again. And that is powerful. The cries of a young man just saying, "I just want to live. I just want to live. I want to have a good life experience." And then one of the songs he said, "We don't want no trouble. Just go. We don't want no trouble. Just go. I just want to live." What an amazingly important cry it is for a young person to sing a song that represents the thoughts, the hopes, and even the fears of everyone within a culture, of an entire people. We know as a Black people, because you hear folks say, "Man, racism doesn't exist." We know that's not true. People say that segregation doesn't exist. Segregation doesn't exist in its blatant form, but there are systematic segregation still. Yeah, you can look at it in employment. You can look at it in the hierarchy of employment. You can look at it in political systems, in systems that are set up. So all these things still exist, but what we're dealing with is we're dealing with glass ceilings. In other words, it's still there. They just don't want it to be noticeable. They don't want it to be seen. So these kind of conversations are extremely important to have within community. And I really wish we can get more people on Facebook to join in and to be a part of this conversation, because it's an important conversation to have. It's one important to have as a church, as a community, as political leaders, as advocates for community, and as advocates for people. This is a conversation that needs to be had on a larger platform, and there needs to be some very uncomfortable conversation. And if we're not willing to have uncomfortable conversation, we're not really willing to have real results.
Amen.
We have to have these conversations. We have to have these conversations in order to have some results that will change and that will stay in place and not create a false truth.
Yes.
And that part's really important, that we don't want to have these false truths. I heard someone say some time ago, "Man, I can't wait for things to return to normal." In regards to the COVID-19, he said, "I can't wait for things to return to normal." And my issue with that particular statement, and I know they're just regarding sickness, but what is normal, or what was normal? And that really goes to what kind of people we're dealing with. What is normal, and what is normal to whom? Barack Obama wrote a statement pretty recently, and he says that we often hear people say they can't wait till things get back to normal. And he writes and he says, "Being treated differently on account of race is tragically, painfully, and maddeningly normal." Is that the normal that we want to return to? Is that the normal world we want to return to, where who's next? Okay, we had Trayvon, we had Aubrey, now we have George Floyd, and the saddening truth behind that is those are the individuals who were caught on film. Those are the individuals that was recorded. we know that there are countless women that are not represented in these counts. That there are other countless young men and older men that are not represented, that have had these kind of experiences, and families that have had these kind of experiences and tragedies that were never brought to the surface. They were never discussed. They never saw what I call social justice. Because if not for these videos, what happens when these things aren't caught on film? What happens when these things aren't brought to the surface? What happens to those families? And what happens to those police officers when these things aren't caught on film? And the problem is that we've been dealing with this since slavery.
Yes.
It was a prominent part of American culture. And it was a prominent part of American culture that blacks weren't considered citizens. We were considered property. And as property, they could be treated any way that the masters wanted. And that is a deep rooted part of American history and culture and founding principles. Even if you look into the Constitution, you see where it says that we were considered 3/5 of vote, 60% of the vote. Um, and that's if you were able to make it to a place to vote without receiving police brutality.
Yes.
Talked about, I believe it was in the early 1920s or 30s, I believe it was. I forgot the date wrote down, where blacks went out to vote, and they were beaten by it was in Alabama. They were beaten by police officers on their way to vote, um, for trying to exercise a right that was considered not afforded to the black population from the mass, from the majority of individuals from the white population that was there. So now we are here in 2020, and now what? We have been working diligently throughout history to have a place at the table in this land, to feel a part of this country, to feel that we matter in this country. We have had things from 1955, the bus boycott, the sit-in movement of 1960, the Core and Freedom Rides of 1961, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the rise of Black Power, created by the Black Panthers in 1965. We had the Million Man March of 1995, but we still have tragedies. We have tragedies that keep going on, and the only thing that's different, really, the only thing that's really different is we have technology. So technology allows us to see it all together so that we can have a collective impact. But how are we going to use this technology to create systematic change? How are we going to use it to create systematic change? And how are we going to fight? There was one quote that said that riots is the actions of the unheard. A riot is the actions of the unheard. And if people are looking at riots saying, man, say this is madness, this is crazy, it's illegal. But the riot is a cause and effect. Something caused that to be an outcome. There was an absent voice, there was an absence of justice, there was an absence of many things that caused these things to come into play. And now that the riots are taking place, everyone's listening, everyone's looking, everybody's got their own comments and their own thoughts. I'm not saying that the riots are right. I'm saying that the riots do gather attention. It gathers attention. Folks say, well, I just want a peaceful, people should just peacefully protest. I'm all for a peaceful protest if the peaceful protest will bring results. So there's important conversations we need to have. And I can't state it enough. We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in some of these conversations, because there are some hard truths that just need to be discussed, need to be brought to the table. If you look at some of our leaders of old, Nat Turner, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Phyllis Wheatley, Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, Harriet Tubman, Ella Baker, W.E.B. Du Bois, Maya Angelou, and many others. If you look at a lot of these leaders, you have to ask the question, how comfortable were they? How comfortable were they? And to what extent were they willing to go to help bring about change? How many times was Martin Luther King locked up? How many warrants for the life of Harriet Tubman was put out? How much opposition did W.E.B. Du Bois face? did Frederick Douglass face? How much opposition? And these are some really important conversations. These are some really important conversations. I look back into American history. I look back into American history and and what was considered normal: alienation of our human rights, brutality, segregation, um, unjust incarceration, overly persecuted within the criminal system or the penal system or the judicial system, underrepresentation even in schools, in underrepresentation in political arenas, underrepresentation in social organizations or organizations that's set up to assist those that are struggling. I look at other arenas where there is a lack of representation at higher levels, where opportunities aren't given because our hairstyle or our look is intimidating. Not because we said anything, not because we did anything, but because we are. Because we are. And those are some of the problems that we face and that we deal with. And how do we as a people move forward? Now, let's take a moment to talk about George Floyd and the situation there. I received the question and people said, man, are you angry? Are you angry? And as a black man who's had the privilege of raising black boys, black young men, black children, I am. And I'm extremely concerned because how many times have we been pulled over and in fear for our life? I remember my son was pulled over once and he came home in tears because he didn't know if that was his last day from a police officer pulling him over. And that's our general experience. That's our experience. How many times are we pulled over with no just cause? What kind of things do we experience as black people in this country? And folks look at it as if this is a taboo conversation. Why are you guys bringing this up? There's no more slavery, but there are the what do you call it? There are the residue of slave of there's the residue of, I can't think of the term correctly right now, but we deal with a lot of problems that stem from slavery that are still systematically in place. You have things like redlining that people of privilege don't understand. You have systematic transportation issues where minorities aren't given public access to transportation to even obtain certain employments. You have lower educational systems that are littered throughout the black community, where we're not given the same educational opportunities. People say, "Well, you guys are allowed to go to school, but we're not given the resources that other schools have." So that when we go to college, we're really underprepared to properly experience it and to properly get involved in it. When I went to college, I thought I was really ready for college when I went there, because I was doing good in my public education experience. So when I got accepted to a university and I went there, I thought, man, I'm at the same level as everyone else until I went to class. When I went to class, I really understood how limited my educational experience was and what resources wasn't made available to me, and what other educational opportunities I wasn't afforded, what material we weren't given, what things weren't taught in our classes, what tools and instruments that was provided for others in more affluent communities that wasn't provided for us in our class. So you walk out of school with honor roll grades, but with a C average education. And you go to a university where now you have to compete with individuals that are given more opportunity, that would allow to navigate within their educational experiences, and were given more equipment, more tools, better books. They were more engaged on their platform, and so now I'm sitting here in class with 40 sometimes to 300 students, and I'm not able to compete. I'm not able to compete. I made it into this system, into this school, but I'm not prepared to be here. I'm not prepared to be here. And then folks look and say, well, you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What if you were never given boots?
Amen.
What if you were never given boots? They pull you up by your bootstraps, but you're not given boots by which to even walk in. So there are no bootstraps. People say, man, we want equality. We need something better than equality. We need equity.
Yes.
We don't need equality because we're not starting at the same place. We need equity. We need racial equity, social equity, employment equity. We need an opportunity to have a better start. People look at the Black family and the social network and say, man, like Black men aren't taking care of their children, because it was designed that way systematically through racism and through slavery. And because of those systems being put in place, it has created this trickle down effect, which has destroyed the Black family. When Blacks did have families and was brought to this country, the men were separated from their wives and from their children and sold into slavery. Sometimes even forced to mate with their mothers and mate with their sisters to create more offsprings, and they were separated. And then we get down to this part, and now we are here, and it's saying, what's wrong with the Black family? You have to look at the history of how the Black family was treated its entire time here. Slavery isn't that far past us. Segregation isn't that far past us. We're still in the same century. We're still in the same 100-year period where segregation was very much a very real component to our experience. We're not that far past it, folks. Man, it's been a long time. No, it's been less than 100 years. That is not a long time. It may not have been in your lifetime, but it was in the lifetime of your parents or your grandparents. You have somebody that's in your family that can attest, I remember. And as long as that's there, then it's not far past. I remember talking to my great grandmother, who was born in I believe it was 1902. And I remember having a conversation with her and what her life looked like as a young Black girl, and how she had to later raise her children. And these are things that we need to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff, because the moment you bring it up, folks are offended. Folks are rattled by it. Oh man, here we go again. Here we go again. But the thing is this: folks don't want you to forget 9/11. They don't want you to forget the Holocaust. But they want you to forget slavery and segregation and the treatment of Black people and the continuation of treatment of Black people, even in this time and day.
That's correct.
If we forget, we will repeat.
Amen.
If we forget it, we will repeat it. So if we don't want to forget it, we must talk about it, and then talk progressively. How do we make things better? My parents asked me this question years ago, and I was almost ashamed of the answer some years ago. I understand my answer better now. When I was in my early 20s, my parents asked me, when are you going to have children? When are you going to have children? When are you going to get married and have children? Because that's supposed to be a very exciting time for a young man or a young woman. Man, to get married, to have children, to have a good job, to be able to raise a family in a nice community. My answer to my parents was, I'm not going to have children in this world. I can't fathom bringing a child into this world, into this society, into this experience. I can't fathom the idea. I can't fathom the idea of doing that. And I had to sit down and really think about that some time later. What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with my experience in this world that I don't even want to bring children into it? That I don't want to do. What's wrong with my experience in this world? And I had to take a hard look. I've had some very traumatic experiences in this world. I remember going to my freshman year in college. I remember going to a jewelry store with my white roommate. And in the jewelry store, I was the one with the money, which was really funny. I was the one who had the money. And I walked into this jewelry store, and they followed me all over the store. And my roommate, they didn't follow him at all. He got to look at whatever he wanted. He got to pick up whatever he liked. No one asked any questions. No one stood by him. But while I was there, that's all they did. So eventually, I walked out. 5 minutes later, my roommate follows me out. And he's just shaking his head. He said, this makes no sense. He says, I told them, y'all just walked out the person who had the money. So if anybody was going to buy anything out of your store, it was the person who just walked out. He says, I don't have the money. And that is how many times have we walked into a store and felt like a thief
Yes.
because
Yes.
we decided not to buy anything?
Mm-hmm.
That's our experience. That's our experience. It is very real. How many times do a police officer get behind you and you have insurance? You're not speeding. Your tags are right.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong physically with your vehicle, but you're anticipating being pulled over.
Yes.
You're anticipating, and it heightens the more you leave an area that you're more familiar with. It heightens that much more. So to be pulled over is a normal. Whether or not we get to live after that experience is now the question. And the
Yes.
problem with that is it has always been the question.
Yes.
It has always been the question. It's just not new. So now we need to do some new things. I remember reading in the book of Isaiah, and it says, God will do a new thing. Have you not heard it? We need to do a new thing.
Yes.
We need to do a new thing. And that begins with conversation. That begins with conversation and some real talk. Some real, hard, uncomfortable conversation within the Black community and outside of the Black community. And what I mean by outside of the Black community is there are those that are in political powers, because we represent, according to the Washington Post, we represent less than 17% of the people in this country. We represent less than 70%. We are twice to 3 times as likely to be shot and killed by a law enforcement officer than our white counterparts in this country. That's according to the Washington Post. We represent a larger number percentage-wise. Now, people say, well, it's more white people in jail than it is Black. Look at the percentage of what we represent in this country, and look at the percentages of what whites represent in this country, and then look at the percentage of what we represent as inmates or incarcerated individuals or individuals that was persecuted or criminalized through the judicial system. Look at those percentages and look at our percentage as a people in this country, and you'll see that these numbers don't add up. Why is it that 2 individuals can go in court for the same crime, but if you're Black, the likelihood that you're going to have a harsher sentence is a very real reality? Folks say that's not true, but the fact of the matter is it is true. It does exist, and folks don't want to talk about it. Folks do not want to talk about it. And it's this undercurrent that creates all of this other stuff. It's because we as a people see the mistreatment of our people. George Floyd is not the first person who's been mistreated in that community. Communities just don't erupt because one person's been mistreated. It erupts because it's systematically in place and no one's doing nothing about it, and folks get tired of it.
That's right.
And then it erupts. And then it erupts in other cities that have experienced the same things. And folks look and say, why is everyone mad? My question is, why aren't you?
Yes.
Why aren't you? I want to open it up for conversation. We have our panelists here. Minister Tiffany Davis out of Detroit, Minister Equella Burns out of Pennsylvania, and we want to open it up for conversation as well. So I open up the platform at this time.
I guess my thoughts today are, what are our first steps? What should be our first steps to bringing about a change as far as this conversation we're having? And my thoughts are that we should start in small groups in each community. Each community should have a leader to represent them and someone to speak up on behalf of the community. It reminds me of what the Black Panthers did. They started in their own communities and started a coalition within themselves. To me, that would help out a whole lot. And you can come to your own private forums, discuss your grievances, try to get some resolution, and then we could collectively, together, make a difference. Because I'm just one that don't believe that calling the police for everything is an option, because I've seen what has happened. If you continue to call the police when something happens in your community is labeled, and they really target you. And it works against your homeowner's insurance when that happens. That's when we're talking about the redlining.
Yes.
And it just become a domino effect of bad things happening for your area. But if you had a coalition within your own community that you could talk to and bring your grievances to, and if they could make a difference, I think that that would be a good way to start. Because sometimes when you call the police out, situations are escalated to be more than what the original problem was. And it does not help us at all. Because what could be just a disagreement between two turns into a death for a family. And I just think that this would be a start, to have a leader in each community to represent us as a whole.
Yes. I absolutely agree with you. Um, and I believe that those leaders can take the concerns of the people to others that are in authority and really stress the concerns of community. But and also will take it a step further as well, that even in community, that the police need to be policed within the
Exactly.
local community. And if I could explain that a little bit further, is that when a police officer comes into a community, the community should be aware of who the officer is, the concern that's going on within that community. Because a lot of times they say, well, man, it's none of your business, get out of the way. But the problem is that philosophy has led to the death of many of our men and our women in our communities. And so now it is our concern. Because if we don't make it our concern, then and we turn a blind eye to it, then who else do we lose as a result? I would hate to be the one in a predicament similar to George Floyd, and everyone turns a blind eye. It's
Right.
just another black man being arrested by the police, because the first thing that comes to mind is he's a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
He's a criminal, and no one takes a deeper look. And thankfully the technology that we have the technology to take deeper looks, to try to release record it and say, hey, this is injustice. Now the other part is, who's willing to go further, even if it means you get arrested, to stop injustice, right? I mean, I can only imagine what would have happened if another black person would have pushed the cop off of George Floyd and say he can't breathe. Will we be looking at 2 deaths instead of 1?
Yes, we would have. Yes,
No.
sir.
And because they would say that that is interfering with police business.
Yes, sir.
And then all a police officer had to say is that they felt threatened. And that creates another situation. So what is our recourse as a people? What is our recourse as a community? How do we protect our young? How do we protect our sons and our daughters? How do we protect them if there's no recourse? The more we come together, the more empowered our community and our voice as a community becomes. And that is the very real truth. If we as a people have made it this far, we have made it this far as a people, but we just made it. I don't consider this living, where I'm not free to move into certain communities. I'm not free to experience certain luxuries of life. I'm not free to even drive into certain neighborhoods, or to drive in certain communities. I was listening to a young man talk once before, and because he drove into a certain neighborhood, he was pulled over. He was pulled over because he drove into a neighborhood just to look around and see what it was like. He was pulled over because we have this criminal stigma that's attached to us, especially that's attached to us as black individuals, and that much more as black men. We have this criminal stigma that's attached to us, and what do we do? How do we protect our sons? One of my greatest fears, especially for my oldest son who had an employment traveling out of town, was, how do I protect him? How do I make sure that he doesn't have a bad experience? How do I keep from having to tell his mother we just lost him to police brutality?
Yes.
How do you protect?
Yes.
How do you protect? And that's a very real concern. I remember growing up, and there were some things that I was taught as a young black child. There were some things I was taught. I was told that I could not leave the city of Detroit. When I got my license, I was not permitted to drive because my grandparents were afraid that I would be picked out, and that I would receive this over policing as a result. So and they didn't want me to have that experience. So I was limited to where I could drive. And there were times where they sent me to the edges of the city of Detroit, and they said, say drive under the speed limit. Don't hold eye contact. If a police officer gets behind you, pull into a store and get out the car and go in. All of these things that I am trained to do as a black child, so that I could, as much as they could help, avoid these kind of situations. And I believe that this is taught to every black child in this country, except you come from extreme privilege. And that privilege, and you have to be popular and known throughout the country in order for that privilege to stand in place. Because you go somewhere where they don't know you, then all the things that we are taught it still applies to you. So it doesn't even matter how rich you are, how famous you are. So these are the things that we have that we have to be taught.
Amen.
These are some of the same teachers that I have to teach my children. Said, man, when you go out into community, these are some of the things that I want you to adhere to. These are some of the things I need you to do, because it's the only way I know how to keep you safe. It's the only way I know how to keep you out of jail, because if they charge you, you're not going to get the same liberties as your white counterpart. You're not going to get those same liberties. You're not going to get that same protection. You're not going to get that same ruling. And that's just the simple truth of it. And folks don't want to have this conversation. Man, why is everybody mad about George Floyd? I seen a post that said white people are being killed as well. And I said, yeah, they are, but not in the numbers that blacks are experiencing it, and not for the reasons that blacks are experiencing it.
Amen.
And that's just a real truth. Statistically, it is proven. Historically, it is proven. And now we need to see something different take place. I was able to meet. Well, I'll stop there. I'll talk about my meeting in a minute. Does anyone have anything they want to add? I was able to meet with a local law enforcement here in town. And we had a conversation about some of these things and how do we deal with that as a community. And I believe that was a wise meeting to have, to call leaders of local community together to be the voice of that community. Same thing that you're talking about, Minister Davis, is that we need to have individuals that will be the voice. We also need to have individuals that even when certain things take place in community, that if it is known that those individuals or those parties that the police are coming to see is associated with these certain leaders, that the police department also contact these leaders and say, hey, this is what's going on. What are your thoughts? Those are some of the things that need to be talked about and discussed, because there are some things where the police there's no need for the police to be involved. It just takes a pastor to show up. It takes a community leader to show up, and they can resolve the whole matter without anyone going to jail, without anyone being prosecuted, and without any deaths resulting, without any deaths as a result of this encounter or of this encounter. And so it's important for local law enforcement. It's important for local law enforcement to know who the local leaders are, and to have some very serious conversations, because there are many cases when the police show up that it's not good news not even for the person that called, because you don't know how it's going to turn out if you're a minority. You don't know how it's going to turn out. So there are times where there are disputes, even domestic disputes within couples that's members of the church. And instead of calling the police, they call me. And I went to their house and resolved the dispute, because there was no need for local authority, because then somebody would have been locked up, a criminal charge would have been given. And how many of us have been criminally charged and criminalized unjustly, and now it forfeits the opportunity for jobs, for travel, for other experiences in life, because we have this criminal charge associated with us that really is unwarranted. Is unwarranted. So these are the things that we face all the time as a people. These are the things we face all the time as a people, and how do we move forward? So one of the things you mentioned, Minister Davis, is having these community leaders.
Yes, sir.
I also believe that it's important to have a strategic plan, to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what's the expected goals, and how do we measure the success of it? How do we measure the success?
also believe not only just the community leaders, the law enforcement, we should also hold our city council representative for our district
Yes.
responsible for these different types of things that we're trying to do to bring our communities together. They hold a great responsibility to each district to show up, to represent us as people, especially the ones that are really destitute. We have some areas in Detroit that really need the support of their council leaders, because that certain areas in Detroit are being targeted, whether they are guilty or not. I don't know if they have different, because police like to say that they don't have a certain rate or a certain count that they have to turn in at the end of the day. Whether that is true or not, I don't know. But that's how we feel as people. Like, I haven't done anything, but you pulled me over and you've given me a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Because personally, that has happened to me. I was pulled over and targeted as a Black woman driving, and it was late in the evening, but I am of age and maturity to be out late in the evening, and the police pulled me over. But what the police didn't recognize was I was talking to my OnStar representative in the car who was giving me directions on where I needed to be. So when the police pulled me over and was asking me all these questions, and I halfway rolled down the window and asked the officer, "Officer, can I help you?" And he said, "Where's your driver's license, registration, and insurance?" And I asked him, what am I being pulled over for? And he said, "Just give me I said, "You have to give me a reason why you are pulling me over." He said to me, "You cut me off," is what he said. I said, "Officer, I didn't cut you off. You were at the stop sign and I just went ahead of you because it was my right of way to go." Mm-hmm. He said, "You were speeding." I said, "Impossible." I said, "My witness is the OnStar representative that is still listening to this conversation." The officer walked away, got into his car, and left.
Wow.
The targeting that Black people experience can turn into any type of situation. It could go terribly wrong if you have no proof, and sometimes even if you have proof, it can go terribly wrong if you don't have the right representatives. So that's what I'm saying, that even our city council representatives need to be a part of this conversation, along with law enforcement and a community leader. Yes. And we should have regular meetings. And then with all of our community leaders together, working collaboratively, we can have a national meeting. Yes. Because there is power in numbers. There is power in numbers. And again, I'm just not one who believe that you need to call the police for everything. I think the police need to be your last resort, not your first one. Yes. Because we've seen how they have treated us over decades, and we can no longer allow this to happen, because this needs to be taken control over. So with my granddaughters, because right now we're just looking at our young men, but I've seen so much footage of Black women and Black girls being beaten just like our young men. And it's just a matter of time before we have to become outraged over our daughters just as well.
Yes. Yes. Minister Quilla, do we have any questions or any thoughts out there?
Yes. Don Johnston stated that it's a lot of deaths that's taking place along with George Floyd's death, and that the media is trying to divert the attention of the nation.
Yep. And that's why these conversations are needed, because we can't be taking off focus. We have to address the things that are going on. I was going to mention that I met with the police department. I think it was on Friday. We had a conversation, myself, two other local pastors, another individual representing another local pastor that represents a good part of the Black community here in my city, and we met with the chief of police and the sheriff's department, and we had good dialogue and conversation. It's something that I think is really needful and a step in the right direction. One is to find out the police version of it and how they feel in other areas of law enforcement, and to begin to really have these tough conversations as to what they think, how they feel, and how do we foster a positive relationship and a positive experience in this community. One of the things that I think is important as well is that conversation needs to be had in every city, in every district, in every state throughout this country. How do we have these conversations, and how do we help implement change? I think one of the unique things here is that we have a sheriff department and a chief police that is open and willing to hear us out, and genuinely is concerned about the welfare and the welfare of the people in this community. And I believe that their concern is genuine. But we also have to have conversation as to who they employ. How thorough is the background checks? What has been the experiences of these individuals in other communities before they employ them to work in this community? To really have those background checks, because if you employ someone and you later check their background and find out that is literal racial rhetoric, racial connotation, racial history stuff, then not only is your department held accountable, but so are you as a hiring individual of that officer. And I believe that there are certain people that shouldn't be put in authority, and there are certainly certain people who shouldn't own a gun,
Right.
because they abuse the authority and they abuse the power. But we have seen that systematically set in place throughout the history of this country, and now it's just a matter of having a conversation and say, hey, we're going to hold someone accountable. And very rightly so, very rightly so. So these conversations need to be had. People need to be held accountable, and officers and chief police, state police officers are across the board need to sit down with community and have these conversations. And community leaders need to represent. It is now time that we not, and I hope I'm not offensive by saying this, but it's high time that we stop hiding behind our pulpits and stop hiding in our churches, and that we come outside and we deal with the issues at hand.
That's right.
That we deal with the issues at hand. For many years, the church was the backbone of the local community. Many people run to it, they look to it, they trust it, and now is ones in church leadership, because it's many times that we're the one that hold the bigger crowd of the community, especially the underrepresented. We hold the larger crowd and the attention of these individuals, and now it's time for the church to stand up and say, hey, let's protect. Let's come outside the churches and let's look at our communities. Let's really look at our communities. Really look at the injustice, and work for a better tomorrow. If we don't do something today, what just took place yesterday will take place again tomorrow, and then the tomorrows after that. And folks say, well, it's not my family, but you keep living and allowing these injustices to take place, and it may just as well one day be your family. It may just as well one day be your family, because in times past, it was all of our families. It was all of our families. I know for a fact, by doing some genealogy testing and talking to my great grandparents, my family, we are a product of slavery. We come from it. We were that's the beginning of our American experience, is slavery, and that stands true for many Black Americans in this country. So now we're trying to rebuild from the dust and the ashes that we were given. How many Black Americans living in this country have no idea what their origins are? They have no idea where they come from. They don't know what their traditional race, their race is. They don't know their culture. They don't know the culture of their people. They don't even know their own language or what their names would have been in their own tongue. We have no ancestral trace because it was taken from us. So then you have people that's left with no identity. I did a DNA test, found out that I was 42% Nigerian. Found out that I'm 92% African, 92%. And that's huge for me, because by me doing that, I was able to look into some of the other races of Nigeria, and I'm closer to finding out what tribe I actually come from. And when I listed that on Facebook, I have relatives that contacted me and said, "Do you think that I'm that as well? Is that our whole family?" And it means something to know where you come from. I'm doing it. I'm helping individuals do the U.S. Census right now. And one of the questions is, if you're white from where? Are you English? Are you German? Are you Italian? What white are you? And folks are telling me, well, yeah, my family comes from Germany. My family comes from Europe. My family comes from here. But when I talk to blacks, all it says is black or black American. And when it says, what black are you? No one can identify, because we don't know, because we lost that part of our history, that part of our heritage. And we were given this new identity, which is littered with fractures and broken pieces of identity. It's littered with it. Our families are broken. Our family units are broken. Our children have no identity. Our men have no identity. Our young boys are growing up with no identity, no sense of purpose or sense of self. And we lose all of these things. And now we're at this place, and it's okay to kill us. And I go back to the song of this young man. I just want to live. We don't want no trouble. Just go. Just go. We don't want no trouble.
Apostle, you were talking about the different types of protesting, and our peaceful protest is treated much differently than our white counterparts.
Absolutely.
We're showing up with no guns and, just speaking our piece, and we're being beaten and taken to jail, arrested, and mistreated. When I watched at the state capitol, when they protested, they carried heavy artillery. You're wondering, where did you even purchase that from? How were you even able to get that in your possession? Face to face, going face to face and head to head with law enforcement, nothing happened. Because if you are a person who carry firearms, they teach you, you don't show it unless you plan to use it. So how can they consider that a peaceful protest? None of them went to jail. But when it comes to us, we're protesting, we're standing our ground, but we're beaten and we're arrested and we have no weapons.
Yes.
That is alarming to me. And I think that something needs to be done.
That's the status. That's the status of this country. And it has always been. We as Black people cannot do what white people do, because we are not valued to that level. The
question is now, if we can't do it peacefully, then what do we do?
That is the question. And that is a conversation that leaders need to come to the table and have. It's a call for a very uncomfortable conversation. But it is a call for a conversation nonetheless. And was it Malcolm X who said, by any means necessary? Now that's alarming and that's frightening.
It is frightening.
Yep, it's alarming and it's frightening. And folks say, why do we have to go to those measures? Sometimes you wonder if force has to be met with the same equal force in order for people to really understand and get it. We've suffered this treatment for centuries now. We've suffered it for centuries, not just for decades. We've suffered this treatment for centuries. What level of force do we have to meet force with to unravel this systematic treatment? What level of force do we have to meet it with? And is it even possible to unroot it? Many times, if you want to take a tree out, you dig it up from the root. You dig up a weed from the root, or else it grows back. If you just cut a weed off at the top, that weed will grow back. And I think many times we have been dealing with problems, these racial problems, oppression, social oppression, systematic oppression. We have been dealing with it by trying to chop off the head of the weed, but we've never dug it up. And this is why it keeps coming back up. This is why we continue to face it, because folks are afraid to put their hand in the dirt and get dirty and dig it up from the root. But unless we're able to dig it up from the root, we're going to have this problem for the history of this country. It's going to repeat, and it's going to repeat, and it's going to repeat. And then you get into civil unrest. The problem that I think that we face many times is we protest and then it goes away. And what I mean by that, if you take Trayvon's case, how long has it been since we heard of that? When it first took place, Trayvon Martin, when it first took place, it was everywhere. We all heard about it. We all knew about it. Black Lives Matter. And then it subsided until the next one. And then it rises back up, and then it subsides. It almost brings to the place to think, and I know we've run into church time. If you wouldn't mind, I know we've got folks watching. If you wouldn't mind, we do apologize that this is running into our service time, but we're going to continue this conversation. Yes, we're going to continue this conversation. I believe it's relevant. I believe that it's necessary. So I don't want to end it. I want to continue. I want to continue this conversation. And so I do apologize for running into service time. So just consider this part of the service time for this particular conversation. But we need something that won't lose its power, its flame, its energy, just because it's been resolved in court. Because the problem is, though that particular issue or matter may have been resolved in court, the matter is not resolved. Is not resolved. And by arresting one individual and saying, okay, we're going to charge this individual, doesn't take away the entire matter, the entire problem, because it's bigger than just that one individual. It's bigger than that because it keeps showing up. It keeps happening. And so then what do we do? What do we do? Do we have any other questions or any statements, Minister Equala?
Minister Russell said voting is a part of the concern as well.
It is. And I think there needs to be an educational component to teach voting and what voting does, because I think we need to understand electoral votes.
Right.
People need to understand that. How much does your vote really matter in the whole scheme of things? Because we've seen presidents that was not the popular vote, but still elected president. And so I believe that needs to be understood. How does your vote weigh on local levels? Is your city divided into districts? So, and how does your vote weigh in those kind of arenas? So it's a lot of things that need to be taught and educated. But the problem many times is that we are not given the same tools at the same level. So we go out and we have a lack of understanding as to how to deal with things. And especially if you're in a city where you're underrepresented. I think it is powerful and alarming to work at a company that you're underrepresented, and at the hierarchy of the company, you're not represented at all. So that is an alarming place to work, because it lets you know where all you have to do is go find the longest Black individual working there, figure out their role in that company, and you now know how high you can go. That's the glass ceiling. And folks say, no, you can do that. But it is it's very unusual to surpass that. One of the first things I did when I went to work for a company after I graduated college is I looked at its hierarchy structure to figure out what was at the top, who sat on the board, how much did the highest making people make in that organization and in that company, and then where were Black people at? Because that would give me an idea of how high I could go. If you're in a city where you're underrepresented or you're not represented at all at the political level, that should speak volumes to you. And it should also let you know the amount of fairness for your kind within that system. It should let you know that those sort of things you should know. You should be able to look at that and say, hey, wait, I'm not represented in the judicial system. I'm not represented in City Hall. I'm not represented on the police department. I'm not represented in the sheriff's department. I'm not represented at all. So where are they going to find a jury of my peers when I'm not represented at all, at no level? And if you are represented at some level, to what extent? Is your representation less than 10% at any and all levels? Because that should speak volumes to you, and it should be alarming and concerning. that there is this limit of representation. Because the truth of the matter is, there are many Black people qualified to do many jobs and work in many arenas. And same thing for Latinos, the same thing for the Arabic community, the same thing for all Black and brown people. There are many that are qualified to work at these levels. My question becomes, why aren't they there? Why aren't they there? I was talking to an individual and they said, I would hire someone, but I can't find minorities with master's degrees. And they said this at an event that I was sitting at, and I am a master's degree recipient from the local university. And I'm sitting there while they're saying this, and my thoughts was, what do you mean that there are no qualified minorities with master's degrees? Because last I checked, the university was graduating quite a few of us with master's degrees that were qualified, hoping to reside in this community and find decent employment. So the question then becomes, who are you interviewing, and where's your platform? Where's your platform? And these are the things that take place. These are the things that take place throughout community. Underrepresented, not given opportunities that others that are many times even less qualified are afforded because of race. Applications thrown in the trash because our name identifies our race, or to some people that they think that it sounds like a certain race, so they don't consider the application. And these are very real. These are very real. You can find it statistically. You can find it in any data system. You can go online and look at it in Washington Post. You can look up statistics. We deal with the school to prison pipeline, which is very rarely addressed, where our young are being put in incarcerated or criminal situations and given a criminal mindset at a very young age. And those things aren't addressed, where you have individuals that are being our youth are being pulled into certain environments without the consent of their parents, or even the awareness of their parents. And understand, I'm not saying that all white people are bad. I'm not saying that all police are bad, or all people in political positions are bad people. I'm saying that it's time that we start having conversations so that we can distinguish what systems don't work, what systems need to be modified, what new systems need to be created, and who needs to be at the table to make sure that all people are represented when these systems are put in place.
I do have a comment, Apostle Boone. I know that it's a post going around on Facebook, and they are asking that Black and brown people not spend on a particular day, which I think is a really good idea, but I think it needs to be more than just that one day, because people like to say, put your money where your mouth is. And I think if we just try it this one time and see the power in that, that will cause some awareness to the opposition that we are we're looking toward making them or forcing them to change. But my question to you is, where do we start? Since we agree that law enforcement, city council, each representative for that district, and a community leader is needed to start this change. How do we even start to go about getting our community representative? How do we start? Because I live in the city of Detroit, and I'm going to tell you, since this pandemic has happened, and we've lost a lot of loved ones, and seeing police brutality every day, all day, because people are posting it, you can see it live while it's happening. This city is on the verge. I'm not kidding. You can tell it's an intense environment. Just going to the gas station, just going to the supermarket, everybody is like, I wish I would. You know, it's just really intense.
Mm-hmm.
So something needs to start now. All this conversation is good because we do need the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we start putting this into action? And I think that's what a whole lot of people are waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
What is the action to start this ball moving?
I think that we need to take advantage as leaders of our platforms in two respects, because you have leaders that's going to stand as the middleman between local authorities and the community at large. And these local leaders are going to be the middlemen, and we need to take advantage of our platforms. We need to take advantage of the platforms that we are given. And what I mean by that is we can't wait for local law enforcement and local authorities to come to us and ask us to come to the table. I think we need to be proactive in our approach, and we need to go to them. And we also, in that same breath, need to go to our local community and begin to have conversations with them. These conversations need to almost take place simultaneously, so that we are taking the views, the concerns of the people to those that are in power, and having that conversation and taking their thoughts and concerns back to the people. That's one thing that needs to take place, is those conversations need to happen at both levels. Another thing is that we start putting together a strategic plan, figuring out if we're going to make change happen. The Bible says, count the cost to see if you have sufficient to make it. We need to know, what is it going to take to bring about long-term systematic change. And if we're going to do that, we need to have a plan. We need to have a vision of what we're looking and hoping to accomplish. Martin Luther King said this: I have a dream that little white boys and little white girls will be able to hold hands in fellowship, and that we will not be judged by the content of our character. The man called it a dream, but the man had a vision. He saw what he would have liked to see for the Black community. He saw also what he would like to see for the country as a whole, that the United States will be forced to live out the meaning of its creed. That's one of the statements that he made, is that I see this taking place, I see this happening. And he said, I've been to the mountaintop. I might not be able to go there with you, but I have seen this take place. The question is, as leaders, what do we see? What do we see? What are we hoping to see? What is the outcome that we're hoping to be able to grab hold of? And how far are we willing to go to make it happen? Martin Luther King gave his life in pursuit of the civil rights movement, so that Blacks would have an opportunity to equality, equity, and fairness. Unfortunately, he left. It would have been nice if others would have grabbed that same baton and kept the movement going, even to present day, with the same intensity, until we've seen things change for good. Okay? We saw things change, and that was great. We saw things evolve and things be modified, and that's great. But we're not done. We're not done. We're not done. And it's almost like they begin to dig around the tree and they expose the roots, but no one pulled up the tree. Says, well, I've got the roots exposed. Now we need someone else to come and pull it up out the ground. Because if we don't change this, and if we don't plant something different, then this tree is going to dig deeper. And then you're going to have to start all over again. And you're going to have to dig deeper. Now, the thing is, now, what some people took back in those days won't be accepted in these.
It won't be accepted.
It won't be accepted in these days. And if we don't want to see absolute chaos, then leaders have to ready themselves to be uncomfortable and come outside of their comfort and begin to have some very real, serious conversation. And I'm not just saying that we sit down and talk, because talk can become cheap after a while. If there's only talk and no action behind it, then talk is ignored, and people will take it into their own hands. So if we don't want to see those things transpire, then we need to have a plan. We need to have some small wins leading up to bigger wins. So it just can't be just straight conversation. There has to be some action as a result of those conversations. If we say this is what we're planning to do, there needs to be some results that confirms what we spoke. Because if there's nothing that confirms what we're speaking, then all it is talk. And talk is cheap. Talk doesn't bring about systemic and permanent change. It just doesn't, if that's all it is.
I would like to say this, Apostle Boone. You mentioned that leaders have to use their platform, But we know that leaders, unless it's going to benefit them, they really don't have much interest in trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
What we're dealing with now is people, your everyday citizens, who are now worried and concerned about their children. Because a lot of these leaders, if there's no benefit in them, benefits for them to either get any recognition from it or finances from it, they're just not interested.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not bothering them, they're not concerned.
Mm-hmm.
People, your everyday citizens, your everyday Black parents, these are the ones who are motivated and waiting, because a lot of us don't have a platform, but we do. We just don't know what that platform is. We are waiting for instructions on what to do. So it just seems like for the average person who is waiting, you're supposed to find that leader, I guess, in your circle. Would that be your city council member? Are we going to our city council saying, hey, we need you to start some type of action? Or is this going to our church and say, hey, pastor, you need to make some movements here in this community? But for the everyday parent who is willing to take action, what is it that we can do? Because again, a lot of leaders are not going to move because they play politics. They don't want to say anything. Yeah. They don't want to hurt their reputation. They don't want to make it seem as if they're being too Black, pro-Black, or they don't want to make it seem like they're not Black enough.
Yeah.
But the people who are ready to make a movement are your everyday citizens who don't have a political background, but are motivated to get out here and start a movement on behalf of our children so they won't suffer anymore. That we will take the punishment, that we will take the stripes so they can have this dream that Martin Luther King had, to be a free people. That's what I think a lot of people are waiting on. What can we start now?
There's something that you mentioned that leaders won't do anything if it doesn't benefit them. The thing is, not doing anything, this benefits them. That's even a word I can use. Is a lack of benefit for not doing anything. And if we do something, it benefits everyone. It benefits everyone. It benefits us all as a whole. It's just that they don't see the benefit. They don't understand the benefit. But you say, where should we go? Everywhere you pay money. If you support a ministry, you should go to your ministry. If you pay taxes, you should go to everybody that's paid by you. At every level, so we talk about the platform of the people. The people have a platform because the people are giving money. The people are supporting communities. The people are supporting churches. The people are supporting city councilmen and city council women and state representatives and in Congress. They're supporting all of these things. So that's the people's platform is wherever their money's represented at. And at every level that their money is represented at, they should be having conversations. I'm saying, hey, this is what's going, because the people perish for lack of knowledge and overall just for plain ignorance. Take advantage of the resources that you have as a person. You may not have millions, you may not have billions, but you have something that gives you a right and a voice at the table. And if your money is supporting it, your voice should be there as well. If your money is supporting it, your voice should be there as well. Amen. All right. In that we can't be afraid. People are intimidated, and that's a lot of times why people don't go to certain platforms and certain places. They're intimidated by the people that's standing there. If you don't have the best vocabulary, Moses had to deal with Pharaoh, and Moses was concerned about his speech. God gave Moses a representative, said, you will use Aaron. If you don't have the best speech, find somebody in your community, find somebody in your circle, find somebody in your church community that's more proficient in speech and utilize their talents and their abilities to be a voice piece for you and your concerns. But everybody can do something to help push change forward. I mean, we don't have to go and loot everything and rob everything. But I totally get that sometimes you need to make a splash so that people will begin to pay attention to what you're trying to say. There was once a time I wanted to get everyone's attention. Everyone was talking, so I had to do something abrupt to get everybody to calm down and pay attention and look at me so that they could see what I needed to talk about.
Right.
But at every level, we are able to have conversations and talk with someone. Everybody in every community has someone that they can reach out to and say, we need to have this conversation. Sometimes it's a matter of going to our church and say, hey, I know it's Sunday, but instead of traditional church and a traditional word, can we talk? Because
Yes.
I'm afraid for my children. I'm afraid for my sons and my daughters. I'm afraid for myself. I'm afraid to leave the house. I'm afraid to get in my car. When I first moved to the city that I live in, that first year, I got 3 tickets in 1 week. Do you know what my result was after that? I bought a bike because I was afraid to get back in my car. I was afraid to get back in my car. Because I'm like, how do you get 3 tickets in 1 week? How do you get 3 tickets in 1 week? And I'm trying to pay attention to the speed limit. I'm trying to pay attention to my surroundings. I'm trying to obey the local law. But I was just learning the environment and the surroundings. And in the law enforcement had no compassion. No empathy for my situation. I don't know the place. And I was ticketed after ticket after ticket. And I bought a bike and I started riding my bike to work. And I started walking because I was afraid. And if that's my experience, magnify that by every other Black individual living in communities. And then we see the grand scheme of the problem. Folks look and say, man, well, why are you angry? Why are you upset? I want you to understand that I'm not misplacing my anger. I'm upset and I'm very disappointed because in this day and age, things should be different. Things should be different.
I agree with you, Apostle Boone, when you said that everywhere my Black dollar is spent,
Mm-hmm.
all of those different entities need to be held accountable. With this blackout that they're asking the Black and brown people to do in the upcoming month and not to spend,
Mm-hmm.
I believe we can shut a whole lot of things down if we, more than just one day. It have to be a sacrifice that is given. It has to be a sacrifice of, I'm sorry, I lost myself. It have to be a sacrifice on the people behalf to make a movement. And I think that is at least a start. Nope. That we require everybody that uses our money for their behalf, everybody that we spend money with, everybody that we interact with and have business with, mm-hmm. They should be held accountable to give an answer upon what side are you on? Are you with us or are you against us? Because by you not answering and by you not responding, you prove to me that my life does not matter. You only care about my money. So I'll agree. I will agree that is at least a start.
There is something else I want to mention as well.
Until we can find the community leaders that we need.
There's something I want to mention. On the July 7th blackout, my concern is the strategic plan. What's the strategic plan behind it? What are we hoping to accomplish? How do we measure it? Because I think it's one thing. See, when Martin Luther King did the bus boycott, he had a plan behind that. He knew what he was looking to create and what platform it would allow him to be at, and we knew who the leader was that would represent our voice. So it was no question about it. We knew, and it made it a peaceful protest, but it made it a very dramatic and powerful one. But I think what also helps that is knowing the plan. It also, or at least having a plan. And he discussed that on a large platform. This is what we're going to do, because and this is how we're going to do it, and these are the results that we're going to receive from it. During the blackout, and this is not to speak against many other movements that was made, but we had a 1 Million Man March some years ago. And then once the 1 Million Man March was over, that was it. It was a great gathering. but what did it produce? What were the long-term results of it? What was the goal of it? Were there any measurables put in place, or was it just to prove that 1 million Black people could come together in one location? And then we hear speeches. What's the follow-up? What's the follow-through? What's the conversations? What conversations? Who is now at the table to represent our voice, and at what level? What things are we seeing as a result? And those are the and I think if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a strategic plan as to what results you're going to receive from this, how you're going to measure it, how do you move forward, how is it implemented, what are the carryaways from it, then what are we doing? See, I believe that those measures will be impactful. I do. I honestly do. I believe that if every Black American don't spend nothing on that one day, that it's going to be profound and it's going to be impactful. But for how long?
I think it needs to be more than one day.
No, but
I think
we
it
also
needs
need
to
to
be
identify
a commitment of us to do it quite a few times throughout the month to raise awareness. And I saw that Yolanda Ellison put up a statement that says, is there a Black list of Black businesses listed that we can support at this time, which is great. And I think that should take place. But even those Black businesses need to be held accountable to support the Black community back. If we're going to support you, you're going to support us back. Because I think at this point right now, what we're dealing with, we need to be aware of who's on the right side of this problem. And it needs to be recognized. Because if they can say in your face, your life don't matter, then we can say our money will be taken to where it does matter. And we will support those who support us.
No,
at least that will give, because I believe if you take your money away, you force them to make a seat for you at the table.
Yeah.
Because they want to stay in business. They want to keep their monies going. So they need us because we spend more money, they said, than any other race. So if you want my money, you're going to provide me a seat at the table and you're going to listen to what I have to say.
Yep.
So I think it's going to take more than just one day of that happening. Yep. It's going to take quite a few days, and they have to be a sacrifice of the Black and the brown community so that we can be heard.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it will take more time, but I still think we lack a strategic plan.
True.
And if there is one, where can we find it? What is the long-term outcome of this? Do we just do this and we hurt the economy, but we have no follow through? Who's the voice of the people? And how do we prepare for it? Even when Martin Luther King did the boycott, the boycott of buses, he gave them a plan. Said, go talk to your neighbors, walk, carpool, do whatever you have to do. He gave the people a plan. And I think what the blackout is a good idea. Maybe I need to research some more of it to find out who's in charge of it, who's facilitating it, so that we can understand what's behind it and what's going to be the follow through. Because I'm all for supporting things that's going to bring about change, but I don't want to support it just to support it and then nothing comes of it. I'm all for protesting if the protest is going to bring about change, but I don't want to protest and then 3 months later or a year later, there's no more talk of it, or the talk is so died down that you don't even hear about it anymore. And that's I think that's where the important part is. What's put in place that will help to guarantee the success of this program and give us some measurables by which we can see the success of it. And when the table is provided, who's sitting there?
Yes.
Like if we do something like that, and let's say the president says, hey, I want to talk to somebody, who's going to represent us that we're not going to cringe at? Say, oh no, that's not the person to represent us. So I believe that it starts with the grassroots, what you mentioned earlier. It goes back down to the community and having talks at the ground level with local leaders. And I don't think that it's something that's going to take place all in one moment. So even with the the boycott and the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King's day, it was something that we had to be patient through. It was something that took time. It took planning. It took conversations. And it took a gathering of leaders. And it wasn't just the Black community that was gathering in the leadership to help push that civil rights movement forward. It was other people in other communities as well that believed in what was being fought for. And we need to know, we need to be able to identify who those are, because I believe that we would have local law enforcement that will be advocates in that arena. That we do have people at the political level that will be advocates in that arena as well. But we also need to start having these grassroots conversations and really taking a look at the numbers. When was the last time we really took a look at numbers and say, man, I'm looking at the statistics and this just doesn't make sense. How long are we going to continue to allow these numbers to be the norm for us? And to really take a look at those numbers and try to figure these things out. But we need to begin to have these conversations at local levels, at community-based levels, and begin to form coalitions that can identify this is the leader of our community. This is the person that's going to go out and they're going to be the voice of this community, and they're going to begin to have conversations with other leaders who are the voices of other communities, and we're going to go sit down at tables and we're going to talk to people in authority, and we're going to look for those people to take that conversation to another place, and we're going to disseminate this information back down into the community. And we're going to continue to have these conversations while we are strategically implementing things that will help make things better for us. And that's police engagement. Having police come to the community and not just be in the community to arrest someone or to enforce a law, but be in the community to engage with the community so that people get to know who the local law enforcement are, and we begin to have those conversations. Because that's a whole nother level of fear. How many times have a police officer come into your neighborhood and you felt comfortable that they were there? And that's a problem as well by itself. So it's a lot of these conversations that need to take place at a lot of different levels. And I think the blackout will be great if it's organized with a strategic plan behind it. If it's organized with a strategic plan, then it is something that could be spanned out. And honestly, I believe that if you really want to get somebody's attention, take away the money.
Exactly.
Take away the money. And this isn't to push for a revolt against local law enforcement. This isn't to push a revolt against Congress or against the state house or Senate. This is to raise awareness as to what's taking place and the steps that we need to take and put in place to see some real results. Everyone's aware, but who's willing to work? Who's willing to go the distance? Everybody says, oh yeah, it's so injustice. I'll go to the streets and I'll protest, and then I'll go back to the comforts of my home, and I'll continue life as it was. It's a good protest. And once it's over, it's over. And then we wait for the next one, and we wait for the next one, and we wait for the next one. When do we say, no more waiting for the next one? Let's do this thing right this time. And let's push for change, because this will save lives. This will save lives. This will save lives, and I think that's important. I would love to be able to go to get in my car and go anywhere I would like, but that's a unrealistic goal. It's an unrealistic dream to think that I can go anywhere I want and be okay. I was talking to a friend of mine just a couple months ago, and he was driving through a city in Virginia, and he stopped at a gas station to get gas. And he said when he pulled in the gas station, the attendant or the person working there turned off all the lights at the gas station. So he got back in his car and he pulled out of the gas station. And when he pulled out the gas station, all the lights came back on. These are the things that we deal with. These are the things that we deal with. I went to visit someone about a year ago, and on my visit, the first thing that I was greeted with was that you're not supposed to be here. And that was I was on the borders of Ohio and West Virginia when I went to visit that individual. So we're dealing with these injustices. We're dealing with this old norm in a new time, and we need to change it. It needs to change. And I appreciate the local law enforcement having a conversation with me, as well as other leaders of the Black community, because that's important. It's an important conversation to have. I hope other law enforcement and local authorities start having those conversations. And if they don't call for leaders, the leaders will call for them, and that the leaders will start having this conversation with the ones they influence, to say, what is your experience? What would you like to see done? Because I think if you create a strategic plan without the input of the community, you're not creating a plan that's going to benefit the community. It needs to be a plan that has the input of the community as well. And that way the community voice is at the table while you're sitting there. Because as a leader, I'm the voice of the community. I'm the voice of the community. It's why I'm there. They believe that I have input and say and influence in the community. And what I say represents their thoughts, their opinions, their fears, and their concerns. And we need to have those conversations. I would love to see something drastic take place. Say, hey, we did this, we're doing this tomorrow, and it's going to create this the day after. But it's steady, and with patience goes the race. And if we can hold it to the fire, then I believe that we'll see change. But it also determines we have to also consider the longevity. One scripture says that one of the fruits of the spirit is long suffering. How long are you willing to go? And what are you willing to sacrifice that you may have this change? Because conversation is great, but you need the components of conversation and action. But before you can have action, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan of action. That way you're not just out there running reckless. That you're not just running reckless with very limited and undetermined results. You want to have a plan. Minister Equella, could you read what Melvin Dern wrote for me? I just seen his name pop up.
And Yolanda Ellison as well. I saw
Yolanda Ellison as well.
Melvin Dern said, I think white officers need to leave Black communities. They can't be trusted to be fair, or in all communities, Black and white only, so fairness prevails.
All right. If I can address that real quick, Melvin, Brother Melvin, I understand what you're saying, but all local law enforcement isn't bad law enforcement. I just think there needs to be accountability within it from the community's perspective. But all whites aren't bad, just like all Blacks don't eat chicken and love watermelon and can run fast. So we can't go in with these prejudices as well. We don't want to take these prejudices into it. We know that there is a problem. We know that there are issues going on. We know that there are some concerns that we need to deal with. But we don't want to take those prejudices into it and make a universal statement regarding all, because it's not all. We understand we're having a problem, but it's not with all. But we are having a problem. Just as saying that, because to say that whites shouldn't go into Black communities, somebody can make the reverse say, and Black cops shouldn't go into white communities. It's not all law enforcement. But there are some law enforcement at certain levels that we do need to deal with, because we need those that are in charge of employment to be held accountable for who they employ and what kind of background checks they do and what models and what theories and ideologies they follow within that unit, within those units as well. So those are the things that we have to deal with and that we have to look into. You said there's one from Yolanda.
Yolanda Ellison said, we also need to know not just Black-owned businesses, but Black-owned businesses who support the cause. It could be a Black-owned business that is against the cause. I do not want to support them either.
Yep. That is important. I believe that's important. I believe it's relevant. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to identify. It's not so easy to identify because people can say whatever they want. So it's not so easy to identify, especially when we don't have anything systematically set up where support can be poured in. So we don't really know who supports the cause and who really don't support the cause when there's nowhere to place your support, if you understand what I'm saying. Um, that's why I think systems need to be put in place that help us to identify not just who supports the cause, who's helping to orchestrate it, who are the leaders identified in it, so that we can say, so that the leaders can identify, yeah, we receive support from this, we receive support for this one. We have reached out to these organizations and these businesses, and we have received support. So I believe there needs to be some more structure and more organization. And again, the blackout was one of the things I bring to the table is I believe that is a great idea, but where's the organizational structure component to it? What are the outcomes that we're looking to gain from this? And when the table is made available, who's sitting there? What voice is sitting at the table that represents all of us? And I think those things need to be identified. They need to be identified. So it's some research that I'm going to do. I'm going to do some research to try to figure out exactly what's going on, so that we can
Apostle.
yes.
So I understand that we have been talking about and focusing on the injustices that's been taking place. One of the things that I think is also important in us having this conversation is also the things that take place within our own communities with ourselves. Me growing up in Los Angeles and living in high crime, high gang areas my entire life, and seeing what takes place, seeing the good and the bad of it, but also just not surfacing over that or acting like that's not a part of this too, in order for us to build up the community leaders, because there are people in for example, high gang areas that leader is a Crip or a Blood, if you will, right? And so are those people also coming to the table to say, yeah, let's make a truce, let's this, let's that? And what does that truly look like within our own communities? With us just doing, we can talk about the black and white crime, but there's still black on black crime as well. And I don't want us to not negate from that, because that's just as important as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be an important component as well, and that's why the leaders have to deal with the community as well, because if it's going to be successful, there are some things that some truths that have to be made, some agreements that have to be made at the community level, or else you're going to be working to create this oasis of change at this higher level, and the community is still self-destructive. And so that has to be dealt with. Those conversations need to be had as well. And if we are able to identify who the leaders are, we need to know where they are, where their mind is, what's their goal, what is their motive behind anything, and can the community come together? Because if the community can't come together, we're still at a loss. We're still at a loss. We stop others from killing us, but we continue to kill ourselves. So we're still at a loss, and so those conversations need to be had. And how do we decrease crime? I believe one of the movements of the Black Panthers was they helped to regulate the community, and crime decreased as a result. They helped to feed the community, so they provided sufficient for the community, and as a result, the community responded positively and followed. That's what made the Black Power movement so powerful and so strong, is because of that unified effort at the community level, and that needs to take place. So it will have to be conversations with local gang leaders, especially if that gang runs that neighborhood, and to bring truce to certain things, so that we can deal with this other thing, and hopefully not only to bring truce, but to end it altogether. Because if we don't do this unified at the local level, is short-lived at any other level. It's short-lived. And we can black out all day long, but if we still have violence taking place at the local level that is warranting local law enforcement to come in and deal with the mess that's going on within local communities, we still create the same environment.
Mhm.
It creates the same environment. It becomes a repeat thing. And so those conversations need to be had. Everyone in community needs to come to the table and have a conversation. If we're going to move in this direction for the betterment of not just our people, but for the betterment of all people, what does that look like? What does that look like, and what does that conversation look like? If I could read something real quick, Minister Russell wrote something. I just want to catch this real quick. I believe it is because they don't know who family those white people are a part of, who was a nephew or a senator or a son of a judge or a grandparent or council members. And if the police touch them, it won't go unanswered. And that's where it goes back to infiltrating the system. He talked earlier about infiltrating the system as well, that we have to infiltrate the system in order to bring about change. And I believe that that's a part of it. We need to put our people in a place of power and let them represent our voice. And we need to put people that have strong character, strong morals, strong ethics, strong values. That way they can't be manipulated by the system and corrupted by it. If you read in the book of Ecclesiastes, where we started out in the 5th chapter, in the 8th verse, if thou seest the oppression of the poor and violent perverting of judgment and justice in the province, marvel not at the matter. And I thought that was powerful. Marvel not at the matter, meaning that there's injustices at every level. Government is needed and government is important, but there are injustices. So that we don't become rattled at the thought of injustice. We are not strangers to injustice. We're not strangers to it, so we shouldn't marvel at it when it takes place, but we should be proactive and get to a place where we're more proactive than reactive. And I think that will be powerful if we get to a place where we're more proactive than reactive, because it seems that we're dealing with a lot of cause and effect. That when something takes place, it causes the people to react a certain way. But if we can be proactive, then we don't have to wait for something to take place because we're already there. It's a statement that used to be made earlier. If you stay prayed up, you don't have to get prayed up. If we stay in a place where we're consistently working for these changes and we remain there, then when these other injustices take place, we don't have to work to get there because we're already there. And that's important. So it's longevity. It's having a strategic plan, being willing to have conversation, being willing to be open to speak, but also knowing that it's not an overnight thing. It didn't take place overnight. It's not going to be finished overnight. I think sometimes you get people like you get to a place where I'm not saying people. Sometimes you get to a place where things have changed enough where people get a little bit complacent with the change and say, well, you know what? It's better than what we used to have, so it's all right. Not realizing that not only is it not better than what you used to have, it can be so much greater and so much better for your children to have a better environment and a better place to live and a better experience. If we're willing to continue, not stop because things have changed, but continue to push as things are changing. And I believe that's an important approach. It's an important approach. We're increasing the 12 o'clock lines. We're going to get ready to bring this to a close. Any closing remarks, Minister Davis, Minister Aquila?
I think for myself, I'm going to start in my community by starting with my black dollar, where I spend my money, and try to see if wherever I spend my money, it's not supporting us, I will no longer support them. I'll find other options. I think that's what I'm going to start with. And if they are willing to support, I will ask that they make themselves known, that they are supporting the cause, the movement of for people of color. And they will get more support for people of color. You have to make yourself transparent. Say, I support you all. I disagree with the injustices. And I think that's where I'm going to start. And then I'm going to also start making some phone calls to city council and these different leaders to see what they are going to do and join in with their efforts to start a movement, and to also find one for our community who will be the perfect person to represent us all concerning this matter. So that's my thoughts. I'm going to begin there. That's all we can do is begin there. And I think with this blackout, it have to be more than one day. You have to be willing to sacrifice. And I am willing to sacrifice to say, hey, I won't spend my Black money with you if you don't support us. And I think that that's a start, but it have to be more than just one day. I think they have to feel the hurt. They have to feel the burn. They have to miss us. And that way, when we are welcome at the table, we can do business again. But until then, the only way to beat these people at their game is not to desire nothing they offer. That's the only way to beat them. Not to desire nothing that they offer. So it's a start, and I agree that this would be a great start for us. But like you said, we have to organize along with it. I totally agree, because the longevity of it will bring about a change for generations to come. So that's my thoughts.
Minister Aquila. You're still muted.
We can't hear you.
I said I stand in agreement with Minister Davis. I think that it first starts with me. What is it that I can do in this regards? What is it? What strategic plan can I add? What can I write down? Who can I contact? And what is it that I'm doing can help? Both of y'all know I'm a firm believer in where my money is spent and how it's spent. And I realize that although I may just be one person that may stop shopping somewhere, but it's a lot of one persons
Yes.
that they stop. And in that collectively happening, that's where those things of that blackout can be detrimental, can be very detrimental. But we ourselves have to take ownership in that, because we may do it for 1 day, 2 days, but it's the sacrifice in it, and we have to be willing to sacrifice.
And I just my closing thoughts. I want to say first, William Garcia, thank you. I appreciate your post. I appreciate your writings, and I appreciate your support as well. Thank you. Also, I absolutely agree that there needs to be some organization and a strategic plan put in place. That strategic plan needs to include the thoughts and the concerns of the local community as well, and it needs to be given to those in authority so they may have an opportunity to see it. And if some modification needs to be made that allow them to accept and promote it, then so be. And then we take it back to the community and we have those discussions back and forth until we come to some agreement. I also believe that as far as the blackout go, I still want to see the strategic plan for it and the structure of it. I really want to see that because I'm all for support. I'm all for support if it will bring about change. If it will bring about change, I just don't want to do something that lasts for a moment and was a great hurrah and then is gone and no longer talked about 3 months from now. Because I think sometimes that when it comes to protests and movements like this, that the general idea is we'll just wait, we'll let them blow off some steam, and then we'll all go back to normal. I don't want to go back to normal. Normal has not been a good place for me to live personally, and it's not a good place for me to raise families. And it's not a good place for black men and black women, or black or brown people. Period. It's just not a good place. So I don't want to go back to normal. I believe some measures need to be put in place, and some measures that we can follow, that we can track, and that we can grade, so that we know if it's effective, if it needs to be revamped. And is it producing the results that we're hoping for? And without having measures and a plan in place, you can't follow it. You can't grade it. You can't figure it out. We need to know what's happening at different levels and in different sectors. Like if we're part of a movement, I need to know if Detroit's still following, if Pennsylvania is still following, if Atlanta, Georgia is still following, if Virginia is still following. These measures need to be put in place so that there is a overall systematic plan of movement that we're all adhering to bring about this change, because it's united that these things will take place. Divided and trying to do it a piece here and a piece there and a piece there and a piece there brings about no universal change at all. So I really want to see those things done. And honestly, I would like for us to have another conversation along these lines as well. And even invite some more people to be a part of this platform so that we can address these things. Because I believe this is important. And honestly, this is where we are. This is where we are. And unfortunately, this is what we always been. But now it's time to really discuss it, time to really implement some things that's going to change it. I would hate for 10 years from now that we still be in this spot where we haven't moved any closer to change than we were 10 years previously. So I really want to see some things take place. It does begin with it does begin with me, it does begin with how I engage. But also keeping in mind that there's a team factor to this as well. So every individual that comes on board makes us a stronger team and a stronger unit for change. And just like when Garcia said, if your goal is to bring our community together, make a strategic plan to create racial justice, you have my full support. That's got to be our plan, to create racial justice, to create, to remove all of these glass ceilings and these invisible systematic oppression ideologies and programs, and to make this place a more equitable place to live. I stray away from the word equal or equality. That only works in a world where we all start at the same place. That is not the case in this world. So I don't believe equality is the term we should go for or the results we should seek after. I'm looking for a more equitable end, and more equitable results for us as a people, as a community, as a city, as a state, as a nation. And if we can start gathering people on board, both black, brown, white, and of any other racial descent, then we'll start seeing some real change take place. Because honestly, it's going to take more than just the black community, more than just the brown community. It's going to take everybody.
Apostle Boom, I'm sitting here and I actually have an idea that just came to mind. And I'm going to mention it to you and Minister Equilla after we go off the air.
Okay.
And see what are you all thoughts about it. But I think I have an idea that might start the ball rolling.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. I want to say thank you for everyone that have tuned in and stuck with us through this conversation. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your concerns. Thank you for your interest in this conversation. I know it's something that needs to be had across the spectrum, across the board. But I thank you for being a part of this. I encourage you, take this conversation, take this broadcast, share it on your page, watch it again live, allow some folks that miss it to be able to engage in this, and join us again next time as well. And I appreciate you all, love you all, and there is hope. There is hope. I believe in hope. There is hope. The Bible says in the book of Job, if a tree is cut down at the scent of rain, there is hope. So by us coming together, by us having these conversations, by us gathering with different ones, talking to local law enforcement, talking to different community leaders, there is hope. There is hope. There is hope. But in order for us to bring it to manifestation, there also have to be action. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being a part. And right now we are saying, have a blessed day. Join us tonight at 7 o'clock. I know some say, man, I want to hear some good preaching. Join us tonight at 7 o'clock. We have a dynamic speaker that is lined up tonight at 7 o'clock. You can join us on our conference line. The conference line number is 717. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The conference line, oh my goodness, I'm totally forgetting at this moment. I need somebody to help me out. I'm drawing blanks.
515-603-3109, PIN number 792889 #.
Amen. Join us tonight. Thank you, Minister Equila. I think I'm about to give out somebody's phone number. so join us tonight at 7 o'clock as we receive a word tonight. I believe we're going to be on Zoom as well, right? It's going to be so it will be available on Zoom. So if you want that information, it is available on Facebook. Go to the flyer, grab that information. Join us tonight. Join us tonight. Join us tonight. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day. Look forward to fellowshipping with you tonight at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.